Hello everybody, I'm Stephanie. We've been working together through relieving some low back pain, and I hope over the past few weeks that you've been able to use the first two videos to bring some balance back into your life. I just got bit by a mosquito. So join me on your mat wherever you're at, and we're going to move on dealing with low back pain. So with today's video, we're moving on to part two, which is strength. Once we've kind of got the body back into a little bit of balance, we want to start building some strength to balance out even more in the body, but to hold that balance in. And when it comes to low back pain, it can be all over the place. It can be the hamstrings, it can be the thighs, it can be the glutes, it can be the low back, it can be tons of different things. So we're going to be looking at a ton of different things that we can do to kind of build that strength back. So what you're going to need is you're going to need one yoga block, and I would suggest getting a yoga block and not a book, because you want something that has a little bit of give and that's not going to be uncomfortable, such as books. Sometimes we can use books, but I really suggest using a yoga block. And then you can use a yoga strap, or you can use a belt or a scarf or something else, but something that you can make a tie with some tension to be using. So the first thing we want to do when we're building strength is we want to make sure that we're strengthening the right areas to hold in. So we want to rebalance the hips, the pelvis, the low back, and get all of those joints to go back into where they should be. Because a lot of time when you're in low back pain and those muscles get tight, it pulls things out of balance. So even though we're already worked to kind of bring some balance, we want to make sure that those things are in the right place. So we've got a couple of moves that we're going to do first before we begin to build more strength to make sure things are in the proper alignment. So you're going to grab your block and come down onto your back. You're going to bring the feet in as close to the glutes as possible and bring the ankles together. Knees are going to stay apart, and you're going to place the block long ways. And this is why I was saying it's better to use a block than to use books, because you're going to actually be pressing in on either side. So placing that to the inside of the knees and pressing in. And then bringing the elbows down. You can also bring the hands down if you like to, but I like to bring the elbows down for a little bit more stability here. And pulling the belly button in. Now we're not pressing low back to mat. We're allowing that low arch, the arch to happen in our low back, but the core is pulling in. And then we're taking a very gentle rock. We're just rocking just enough so that the hip comes off the mat. We're not going so far that we're kind of rolling onto the side. So we're pressing in with the knees. Core pulls in, but not pressing through the low back. Core is pulling in, and we're breathing, exhaling as we're moving. Inhale, then exhale, rock. Exhale, rock. Exhale, rocking side to side. And we're going to do this for 5 more. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you might feel some movement in those SI joints and the hips and feeling things kind of go back into alignment. You may not, and that's okay. It's still good to kind of bring that awareness and build some strength there. Then you're going to take the block and place it long ways between the knees, and making sure it's still between the knees and you're not squeezing with the thighs, but right between the knees. Again, elbows down or palms down, your choice. Core pulls in, allow that arch in the low back, and then you're just rocking side to side. We're going to do 5 more. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. And then removing that block from the side. And then you're going to grab either your strap, your belt, or your scarf. And I already have my belt measured here for the right length that I want. The ankles are staying together, but the knees are coming as far apart as the hips. So slipping that band over top of the thighs. So it's right on the thighs, ankles are together, but this time you're pressing out. Same thing, activation, pressing out, core's pulling in, and we're rocking, small rocks side to side. Keep pressing out. We've got 3, 2, 1. Good. And then removing that strap, whatever you've used. And those may not find any movement in there. This one may. This, for me, this is the one that usually kind of, I feel that clunk clunk back into space, into the right space in my body. The knees are going to come over the hips, and you're going to flex the feet and pressing with one hand and pulling with the other. So we're going to start pressing with the left and pulling with the right. I want to try to keep my knees over my hips, so I don't want to let the legs change position. Again, core pulls in, allow that natural arch so we're not flattening out the low back, and then press and pull and fight, fight, fight. Nope, I just already felt a little clunk down into my SI joints. This is the one that works for me. And then release, and then we're going to switch hands. So this time I'm pulling with the left and pressing with the right, really fighting to keep those knees stacked over the hips. Release, reset, switch sides, core pulls in, and press and pull. Release, switch, press and pull. And you can do these not just when you wake up in the morning, but you can also do this right before bed, and then release. So it always seems, I know you've probably heard this, if you've had low back issues and you've sought out any answers, it always comes back to core and glutes. As much as we want to say, no, my glutes are good, my core is good, it always comes back there. We always want to build that strength. So the first thing that we can do is making our way to our tabletop, wrists underneath our shoulders, knees underneath our hips, and finding the flat back. Because a lot of times, if we've been sitting because we've been in pain, I need to come back over, sorry, you can take a break for a minute while I talk. When we're sitting, we're always sitting back in a chair, and the front half of our body gets very, very short. And it lengthens back here and is pushing all this pressure out towards the back with the discs and the vertebrae, and that's why the back is starting to hurt some. So we want to make sure that we're finding a little bit more length, but we're allowing that natural arch so we're not flattening out the back. So instead of thinking I need to have a flat low back, you want to think of instead I want to have a neutral back. So that means that you've got this natural arch in the low back, so allowing the tailbone just to kind of naturally coming out. You're not tipping the pelvis like you do with cat and cow, but you're just allowing this natural arch in the low back. Wrists underneath the shoulders, knees underneath the hips, tuck the toes. With your exhale, pull belly button into spine. Feel that connection first, and just see if you can get some of the pressure off the low back. If it feels like you're still pulling with the low back, allow that natural arch, belly button pulls in, and then gently lifting the knees. So we're kind of in a hovering tabletop. And when you have low back pain, for me at least, it also helps if I engage the glutes just ever so slightly. So the glutes, the core is doing the majority of the work and not the low back. Yes, the low back, we do want to be strengthening it to help out with that, but when the low back is inflamed, we want to take as much pressure off of that as we can. And then the knees come down. You might only lift and hold for a few seconds, and that might be all you can do. When you're in pain, I understand we don't want to move. But if we do not move and get back to some kind of mobility and build some more strength, that pain is going to become chronic and it's going to stay with us. So maybe you come to your tabletop, find your neutral back, core pulls in, tuck the toes, lift, you hold for 1, 2, and you come back down. You just do that a few times. You just lift and lower. And every day, if you do this, maybe you notice the next day you can lift and hold it for a little bit longer. So core is pulled in, glutes are slightly engaged, and we're just holding and building strength, feeling the entire core kind of zip in. So we want to get the core and the glutes to be firing instead of just the low back. There are strong muscles back here, and sometimes it can be that they're just overworked. They're like, hey guys, help me out, somebody. I can't do this all by myself. So we've got our hovering tabletop to build that core strength and to get some glute activation. The next thing you can do is really wake up those glutes. Those mosquitoes are just loving me here today. It's because I'm so sweet. So you're going to come down onto your side and stacking the hips. And if you notice in the last video, we talked about where our hips stack. We want to stack the hips so the top knee comes back slightly. And starting at level 1, all we're doing is squeezing this glute medius here, getting it to fire and lifting the knee. Really holding. So we're not finding dynamic movement. We want to feel those muscles engage. So we're holding and then releasing back down. We may just start with lifting and holding for quite a while. Once it feels comfortable, then progressing, you can lift the knee and lift the heel. So just the big mounds of the toes are staying together. Then you bring the heels back together, the knee back together. So you might do that for a couple days. And once that feels okay, we're going to progress it even more, lifting the knee, lifting the heel, lifting the foot. So you've got the entire leg lifted and this glute is firing to hold the leg up. Really feeling this in the glute. If you begin to let that knee travel forward, you're going to feel it more in the thigh and more in the hip. And we want to get it back in the glute. So remember, hips are stacked. We're breathing normally here, allowing the glute to do the work to hold, and then lowering back down. So we can do the same thing on the other side. So flipping onto the other side, coming down, stacking the hips so the top knee comes back a little bit, beginning with just lifting the knee and squeezing the glute, holding. So we don't want to take this dynamic with a lot of clamshells because we really want to reassociate this feeling of the glute activating, because that's part of the problem, is that the muscles are not firing. We're not having that muscle memory of what needs to activate when we do certain moves. When that feels okay, just lifting the knee, then we progress, knee lifts, heel lifts. And then maybe in a couple days, knee, heel, and foot. Lifting and just holding, really feeling those muscles firing, squeezing the glutes. And then coming back down. Once we've done a little bit of strengthening, we want to pause in the middle, come back to some neutrality, to our child's pose. But as you're going into your child's pose, really thinking arch in the back, neutral back, and reaching the tailbone back. You should begin to feel a stretch into the glutes. And maybe that's all you do. You don't take it all the way down with forehead to the mat. You just kind of move back and forth, really feeling the stretch in the glutes. And then we're going to come back to our tabletop. Tuck the toes, core pulls in very, very gently when you're feeling up to it, moving into a down dog, but keeping a deep, deep bend in the knees. Maybe just pedaling the heels out, and that may be your down dog. Maybe your down dog's always taken a walk. Or if it's not, you've got that deep bend in the knees, but really thinking stretching, not just in the low back, but you're also stretching this front half of the body, because this is the side that has been so crunched for so long. So really reaching the hips back and up and allowing the pelvis to kind of tip forward. You're not pressing it, but you're allowing this neutral position where the pelvis does tip a little bit and the hips reach up. Because even in our down dog, sometimes we crunch the front. See if I can show you here, where we crunch the front and we just lengthen the back, and we want to get length through the front and the back, really stretching, sending that stretch into the hamstrings. These suckers get really, really tight when we've been sitting or having to rest because we've been in pain. So stretching those out. And if it does not feel comfortable to go into a down dog, you can always take it to your back, grab your strap or your belt or your scarf, and you're going to place it right underneath the sole of your foot, keeping the other knee bent. And then keeping a soft bend in your knee, because a lot of times when you use a strap, people are like, oh, I got to straighten the leg completely. And the hamstring is tight. It's really, really tight. So even doing just that much is a lot, and we want to get some length. So keeping a soft bend in the knee and then beginning to pull on the strap, lengthening the hamstring very, very gently. Then if it feels okay in your body, beginning to straighten the leg. But don't worry so much about getting the leg straight. Our intention is more to find that stretch and feeling the stretch also in the middle of the hamstring. If you begin to feel the stretch more in the knee, which happens a lot of times when the leg is straight, or more in the glute, you want to bend that knee a little deeper so that you can get that stretch right in the center of the muscle. Bending the knee, release the strap, and then doing the same on the other side. No matter how you're feeling, if it's just one side that's hurting, we still want to do things equally on both sides. We want to find that balance. So again, soften the knee, pulling on the strap very gently. Can you feel the stretch in the center of the hamstring, right in the muscle? And then release. Then we're going to do one more thing to build our core and our glute strength, and this time we're going to work both together. So you're coming into your chair pose. So really shifting the weight back to the heels, feet are apart, ankles underneath the hips, and I'm doing this for the side so that you can see. And we're going to bring the hands together at heart center because we're not worried about the hands here. We want to work core, glutes. Shifting the weight back, really shifting the weight back and pulling the core in. The core is what's going to take some of the excessive tipping of the pelvis back, but we want to keep a little bit there. And then from here, I'm going to turn it sideways so I can be on my mat. You're going to just take a march, but you're keeping the weight in the heels. So you always want to think back and down at a diagonal. So you're going to step the foot apart, and then the next one comes in underneath the hip. Apart, underneath the hip. Think back and down, back and down. And then we're going to go back, back and down, back and down. You should feel this in the glutes and in the core. If you're feeling it in the low back, stop for a moment. Notice, have you tucked too much and you're putting too much pressure here? So it shouldn't be so much here and then we push everything forward. Allow that natural arch in the low back. So really feeling the glutes, feeling the core pull in. And one last thing that I found that really helped with my low back was just becoming aware of the way that I sit and how I am bowing. A lot of times when we are bowing, we always think, I'm going to bow from the waist. And then we bow from the waist and we're like, oh, that hurts. It doesn't quite feel quite right. This is not where we bow. There's not a joint here that helps us to bend forward. We bend from the hip. So I discovered this the other day. I was helping my husband do some roofing, and so I was sitting on the roof because I do not like to be standing up high. I'm afraid of heights. So I was sitting behind and reaching forward to kind of help with his roofing that we were doing. But I noticed that when I didn't reach forward and I allowed the front half of my body again to crunch, and I'm pushing all that energy out the back, I'm allowing the back to kind of arch instead of lengthen, that it was really hurting. So if I could sit on my sit bones, sit up nice and tall, pull my belly button in and reach forward, allowing this bend to happen from the hips, allowing the sit bones to kind of move a little bit. So I'm not grounding down and then I can only move my spine. I'm allowing the spine to go with the pelvis. And as I was coming forward, this really, really helped. I noticed by the end of the day, if I was conscious about that, my low back, it felt really good. It wasn't hurting as much. So if you are having to do anything where you're bending over a lot, if you're doing gardening, if you're doing roof work and you're on the roof and you can do it safely, really finding that length, core pulls in and bending from the hips. And also making sure that you're switching whatever leg is in front. So right now I've got my right foot in front, then I would switch legs after a while so that I could get the same thing, and I'm stretching out this side, but keeping that nice long length in both front and back. We want to get this balance and stretching out. So this is what happens when we go into our down dog too, but sometimes we're so worried about, oh, my wrists hurt, oh, I can't get my heels down. There's all these other things we're thinking about. So if you're just in a seated position, all I have to think about is length and reach. So I hope those are a few things that can help rebuild some balance. Always, always listen to your body. See how you're feeling day to day. Take it a little bit at a time, even if it's just for a split second. Stay with it and then building that up. Thank you so much for joining me today. Blessings and namaste.